Hello and welcome everyone. I am so excited that we are getting to spend this time together at Perform and learn a little bit more about the Dynatrace platform. You saw some preview on the main stage today. My name is Bipin Singh and I run product marketing for the Dynatrace platform, and I'm joined today with my colleague, Marky Dubey. Marky is a principal solutions engineer here at the Dynatrace, and she has prepared some amazing demos to show you all the platform capabilities that we have. But before Marky does that, I wanted to give you all an overview of our platform through our architecture to orient you what you're going to see in the demos that Marky will deliver. So Dynatrace is a platform that delivers analytics and automation for unified observability and security. It's not a bunch of separate tools. It's actually a single unified platform. And our unique differentiators, you can see it here in the blue box. And these differentiators make up what we call the Dynatrace secret sauce. So let's take a look into how these differentiators make Dynatrace truly unique. So One Agent and Pure Path make it super simple for you to get end-to-end full-stack observability right out of the box. All you do is just push One Agent onto your host, and you're done. We also seamlessly ingest observability data from a broad range of open source frameworks like OpenTelemetry, Prometheus, and so on. Your complete application stack and environment gets auto-discovered. You can get context all the way down to code level for all your distributed traces. And with our more than 650 technology integrations, rest assured that you can connect Dynatrace to anything you want out there. Grail, Smartscape, and Davis, they are the core of our data, AI, and analytics platform capabilities. Grail handles the data storage, data management, and processes data at massive speed, scale, and cost efficiency. Smartscape contextualizes your entire environment and builds a real-time topology map that's dynamic and stays up to date as your environment changes. And Davis AI Engine is continuously watching your environment and evaluating the emerging situation, automatically detecting problems, creating automated root cause analysis for you, and business impact analysis for prioritization. Then App Engine lets anyone create their own specialized application for their custom use cases on top of Dynatrace platform. And finally, Automation Engine allows you to automate manual tasks, such as rolling back bad code deployment for self-healing. This makes the Dynatrace platform really unique and very powerful and allows you to use it for anything you can imagine to fit your business needs. You can use Dynatrace for infrastructure observability, for monitoring your hybrid and multi-cloud environments. You can leverage best-in-class APM to ensure optimal service performance and making sure that you meet your service level objectives. You can get continuous application security posture insights and attack protection. Not only that, you can detect, investigate, and respond to threats in real time. You can make sure that your mobile and web applications, as well as any APIs, are performant, fast, and efficient. You can do analytics using all this observability, security, and business data that's in Dynatrace. And you can drive intelligent automation throughout your DevSecOps ecosystem. For anything that is not available out of the box in Dynatrace, now you have the capability to build enterprise-grade applications, custom solutions that are secure and scalable. So with that, let me hand over to Marky to show us how all these capabilities work together. Marky, over to you.
Thanks, Bipin. So yeah, today, guys, one of the things I want to do is I just want to walk you guys through a little bit of a demonstration of the actual Dynatrace platform itself, so you can understand how everything that Bipin was just mentioning, where he was going through and talking about how we can actually use this for infrastructure monitoring, we can use this for business analytics, we can use this for security analytics. I want you guys to see what that actually looks like in process. And you can understand that this truly is one platform. This is not a separated or segmented set of tools. This is actually something that we want to be able to bring forward. If we can switch the input to the laptop, we can kind of go through a little bit of a demonstration here. So one of the things that Bipin was actually just talking about are those different internal components that actually allow this platform to really work together. So he talked about the one agent, and he talked about the fact that we're doing automatic discovery with that one agent. And he talked about the smartscape, which in everyday terminology, you can think of as a giant automatically generated dependency map for your own environments. Whether it's cross-cloud, whether it's on-prem and in the cloud, it crosses all of those boundaries. So what you're actually seeing here is an example of what the Dynatrace internal AI engine Davis is using on a day-to-day basis to analyze your environment and track behaviors within that system. So here you can actually see we have the one agent. We've rolled it out to an underlying virtual machine here. In this case, it happens to be a Linux host. This could be a physical box. It could be a containerized environment, right? There's several different ways that we can actually take a look at this. And one of the things that we're actually doing here is that one agent then actually went out, and without any additional configuration or setup, it actually went through and detected what are the different technologies that are running on this specific host. So here you can see we've got several different instances. We have Go, we have Java, we have different components that are running here. This system actually happens to be running Kubernetes as well. So again, this is built into different containerized environments. And as we're going through and taking a look at this, one of the things that's really key to note here is just with that single install of that one agent, what we're actually able to do is pull in those different layers that Bipin was just talking about. So we're looking at everything from the host itself and the underlying infrastructure, behavior, and performance. We're looking at things like the process level. We're looking up to the service or the code level transactions and traces that are coming through. And then we're carrying that all the way up to our end user layer. So when we talk about end user layer, this is actually the end user interface where your customers, whether they be internal or external, are interacting with your systems. So this could be a website, this could be a mobile application, this could be a kiosk somewhere, this could be an IoT device. How are your customers interacting with your systems? And can you actually see from that front end, from that end user interface, down to your underlying systems? This is one of the things that Dynatrace does out of the box, is provide you that full end-to-end scope. And we do this through a lot of auto discovery and being able to kind of go through and pull those pieces in. Now, not only am I looking at this for just this one system here, but you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, what I'm also looking at is this is actually showing me interdependencies between my different systems. Again, they could be running in different environments, they could be running in different cloud providers, they could be running on-prem. What we're actually looking at here is how Dynatrace and the one agent are actually automatically detecting how these systems talk to each other. I do not have to go into Dynatrace and provide it with my dependency map. I don't have to tell it these two systems talk to each other and we need to be able to track that. That's actually all automatically discovered out of the box. And I have the ability to go through and actually pull those individual pieces in. So here you can actually see, and this is kind of a large kind of cobweb when we're looking at this. One of the things I really want to point out here is this is not for necessarily you and your teams to come in and try to manually sift through this. Right? We're not here to do manual work. We're here to do automation. So what this is actually showing you, this is a visual representation of what the Davis AI engine is using for its own analysis. So when it's going through and detecting anomalies within your environment, it's using this data, both from the underlying interdependency link here, as well as that end-to-end trace from the end user all the way back, in order to do things like root cause analysis. And we're using that causal AI that Brendan was talking about on stage. We're using that causal AI to determine what is actually the underlying root cause. So we take all of the information from these different layers, and you can see I have the ability as well to go down into each of those different layers. So not only is Dynatrace and Davis pulling all of that information in, but I, as an end user, also have direct access to that data if I'd like to look at it. I don't have to. I don't have to sit here and stare at screens every day. I don't have to sit here and look through charts and try to track anomalies and try to see what's changing. Davis is going to do that for me. But if I want to do my own analysis, if I want to do my own analytics, I have access to all of this underlying data as well. And I can go through and I can track those different systems. So this is that same host we were just looking at. Here I can actually see more details into the underlying processes that are running on that host. I have the ability to go down in. I can see things like the different events that are happening on this particular system. I can go down in. I can see the logs that are coming through for this particular system. And I have everything here in context. And that's really one of the other key pieces we always want to talk about is it's one thing to have the data. It's another thing to have it in context and to make sure that our Davis AI engine can actually see those different pieces. And that's really one of the key things that we want to take note of. In order to be able to do this for performance, for security analytics, you have to have the data in context. You need to understand how these different pieces interact with each other and how those pieces are actually coming through. So when we talk about things like security, we talk about those different components, you'll see this is all being brought forward for you in context of the underlying environment itself and in context of your environment. So this is not something that's pre-built. This is developed and maintained, right, based on what your environment looks like. So this is all being generated in real time based on your actual environment. So if you have systems that spin up and down, you don't have to tell us about it. They're just going to show up. Those are the ideas behind that. And then what we do is we actually take all of this information that's being gathered from these different layers, and the Davis AI engine then goes through and it says, okay, what's changing? What's breaking? Where am I seeing issues within my environment? So here we can actually see an example of where it's going through, it's detecting some anomalies that are happening, in this case, for our end users. So this is actually something that's end user impacting. I can actually see the business impact of this, so how many of my users are actually being impacted by this. It's a great tool for teams in order to prioritize issues. We might have something that looks like a fire over here, but maybe it's impacting 5 people. This thing over here, which looks smaller on paper, until you look at the fact that it's impacting 5,000 users, maybe that's one we need to fix first. So looking at the business context, not just the IT, not just the individual metrics, but understanding the whole picture. How is this actually coming through? And this business context is, again, automatically picked up as we're looking at and tracking those end user interactions. So not something that you have to go in and actually define. We're going to go through and pick that up. And then as we go through and determine, okay, there's an issue happening on my front end, I need to now understand how this is actually, right, coming to be. What's the underlying root cause? And that's where that Davis causal AI comes into play, because this is actually one of the things it's doing is taking all of that information from those interconnected pieces in the smartscape, using all of those back-end internal metrics that's capturing, and it's going through and saying, okay, this is actually where we're seeing the underlying root cause. I, as an end user, I, as someone sitting at the operations desk or sitting at my desk as a developer, I don't have to go through and try to piece this together and try and grab logs individually and figure out how these different pieces tie together. The system has actually already done that for me. And this is, again, another visual example of how this is actually happening and how these systems are, right, dependent on each other. It could be my second day on the job. I could come in, I can see an alert in Dynatrace, I can go into a problem notification that comes through, and knowing nothing about the architecture of the system, I can actually go through and see exactly how these systems are tying together and why Dynatrace, right, followed that path that it did. This also makes sure that I'm not going through and getting a ton of noise and different alerts for different components within the environment that might all be impacted. Because another thing that the Dynatrace AI engine is doing is actually going through and pulling all of that data together so I have it all in one context. I'm not getting 15 or 16 or 50 different alerts to 5 different teams everybody's getting the same information in the same context so they can understand where this is actually coming from. And then once I have that information, once I know what's my business impact, what's actually happening on the front end, or maybe this is a back-end component, where is my underlying root cause, my next step is how do I fix it? Where am I going from here? So now what I can actually do is I can dive down in and I can say, okay, here's where my issues are actually happening. And because Dynatrace has all of that underlying detail behind the scenes, now I can actually go down in and I can see exactly what was breaking. And I can see where that's coming from. So here I can actually see I've got some failed requests that are coming through. I know exactly which requests were impacted. It's not my entire service. It's not the entire process. It's not the entire application that's broken. It's this one little piece that I'm seeing issues on. I have the details at the ready here. In this case, because this was failures, I've got things like my exception, my stack trace, all at the ready for me. So I can actually take this information, I can send this link directly to my engineering team, and they know exactly where the issue is actually coming from. Not only that, but because we want to make sure everything is provided in context, not only are we looking at just things like the exception or the individual transactions, but now we're also going through and we're looking at things like, okay, my application and my engineering team, they've already gone through the effort of putting out logs, making sure they have that detailed context. That's all now here. I don't have to switch between different tools. We talked about that this morning, right, on the main stage. Switching between different tools takes time. It takes manual effort. I want to make sure I have everything here in context. So now I have the logs from my underlying environment all in context. I know exactly where this was occurring, and I have the ability to link this together directly with the underlying code level data, the underlying errors that I'm seeing here, all provided in one view. That's really the idea behind this, is being able to actually pull those different pieces through. And I can dive even deeper if I really want to. Right? I have the summary view here, I have the details, I understand where this is actually coming from. But if I really want to go down in and I want to dive into the underlying request or the underlying distributed traces, I can go through and I can do that. So Bipin was talking about the one agent and the pure path tracing that we do. That's all here at the ready. I can go down in, I can look at every single one of these requests that's coming through. This is all done through automatic instrumentation by the one agent, which, by the way, will also do things like pick up. Maybe your teams are starting to look at things like open telemetry, right? You're starting to look at some of those other frameworks as well. The one agent is going to play right beside those. This is not something it's an either or. You can absolutely use those technologies. The one agent will simply pick up those traces, pick up those spans, and include them right here in context. So here I can actually see as the transaction passed through different levels of my application, through my web tier into my backend application tier, I can actually see at every stage where my time was spent, what was happening, and where I have an error or where I have an issue. I have the ability to come down in and see this for individual requests as well. So I have my top level problem, which said end user are seeing an issue. Here's the root cause. This is the service that needs to be looked at. Then I can actually go down in, see exactly what those errors were, see the logs in context, have all of that detailed information. And if I really want, I can dive down into the individual request, and I can see the details for each of those separate requests. So again, providing all of this information in context. So that's great while the issue is actually happening, or as I'm kind of going through a postmortem of that individual issue. I can go through and I can track all of these individual pieces. Another thing that I might want to do, as I kind of go back to that top level errors page here, is after this has all happened, I might want to go through and say, okay, now for future planning, right? I know Dynatrace is going to keep an eye on things for me, but I want to see maybe this is a larger issue in other parts of my organization, in other parts of my environment that I'm not aware of. So what I can actually now do is, in addition to the analysis and the analytics that Dynatrace is providing, I can actually go through and I can start building my own. I can start testing my own hypotheses. So here I can actually go down in and I can say, okay, I see this log is happening, I see this is coming through. I want to find out if we're seeing these type of exceptions, if we're seeing these type of logs elsewhere in my environment. So one of the things I could do is I could go in and I could open up, right, Dynatrace log view. I could do a search for that, and I could see where else this is showing up. Or I can actually just ask Davis to do it for me. So if I actually go ahead and pull up a little bit different view here, this is actually one of the many applications that Dynatrace is releasing with our new App Engine functionality, which allows for more flexible analytics, more flexible customization within the environment. This one looks a little bit boring right now, but that's because I'm just starting, right? So what this is actually allowing me to do is I can actually go through and I can build out my own custom notebook. I can build out my own, maybe it's a run book, maybe it's just a set of notes that I want to share with my team, maybe it's some different querying that I want to do. So what I can actually now go through and do is, because I want to do some of that tracking and I want to see where else that issue is happening, I'm going to ask Davis to pull some of it for me. So rather than going through and building a query, I'm going to let Davis do the heavy lifting. Right? We have the AI engine. Let's let it do that. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, show me null pointer exception, error logs. And I'm typing live in a demo, so anybody out there correct my spelling if you feel the need. But, all right, saying, hey, Davis, I know we have these null pointer exception logs. They're happening in, right, this one specific problem that we saw. Where else are those happening? I want to see what else is going on. So I'm asking Davis to actually go out and find that for me. And now what you can see is I've actually just gone through and I've searched my entire environment for null pointer exception, error logs. You'll notice one thing I didn't do here. I didn't write any code to do this. I just simply said, hey, Davis, show me this. Okay. This is Davis Copilot. Okay. This is your helper to make sure you can actually go in and take advantage of all of that underlying data. So you have the analytics and the performance tracking that Dynatrace is doing. And then you also have the ability to build it for your own custom use case. Now you'll notice as well, one of the things that actually happened here is Davis behind the scenes actually did go through and build a little DQL query for me. So DQL is Dynatrace Query Language. For those of you in the room who love to tinker, who really want to get detailed, who really want to jump into the analytics, you can go nuts. For those of you who just want an answer, you can ask Davis. It'll do that for you. It'll go through, it'll start building out those queries. And now what I can actually do is I can take this information that I just got back, I can share this notebook with my colleague, and now they have the exact same information I do. I can share this with my boss, right? I can reuse the same report next month and see if it changed. Are we changing? Are we iterating? Are we getting better? This functionality allows me to collaborate with my team. It allows me to run, right, with a new idea and see what comes back. And then I can actually take this information, I can build on top of it to do more advanced analytics for my different teams. I can share this out with different team members. I can build in my own custom filters for these different views. With the App Engine, the sky is the limit, because really what this allows me to do is take all of the underlying knowledge and data that Dynatrace has with Davis and all of that underlying raw data that we have as well, and turn that into my own custom analytics. We start with a base, we start with that overall observability, we start with that security posture, then we build on top, and we start talking about the business itself. What's going on across the board. And I can do that for multiple different views. Now, a lot of these apps are actually pre-built by Dynatrace. You're going to hear about a lot of those this week. But these are also things that you and your teams can custom build. So you actually have the ability to customize and to interact with the underlying data within Dynatrace. Not only that, but maybe you want to take the data that's in Dynatrace, you want to marry it together with data that's in your other business systems. You have the ability to bring that together in one view using things like the App Engine. And you'll see one of the use cases that we've actually built out, because this is one of the business use cases that our customers have come back to us with over the years, is the world is becoming more and more concerned with things like the carbon impact, the ecological impact of our businesses. And some of the stuff that we want to think about there is, as we're actually going through and we're looking at that, things like our cloud footprint. We don't think about it because it's in the cloud, right? It's not a physical entity, but those are things that actually have carbon impact. So one of the things that we've actually built out with partnership with some of our customers is the ability to do, right, some tracking. What is my carbon impact footprint for my underlying cloud? Excuse me. And as you'll see with any live demo, the app needs to load. Excuse me. But here you can actually see just an example of how you can take some of this information outside of the box of performance and security and then move that into what else is going on, right, with our organization and our business. Okay. So we do have just a couple minutes left, guys. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those. I'm going to grab some water while we run the mic around. But if there are any questions, please raise your hand, let us know, and we can kind of jump in. Yes? So the question was, is Davis Copilot only available in notebooks? That is the first place it will be available, but no, it is not only available in notebooks. As it is getting rolled out, it will be available in other views as well. Notebooks is one of the primary places where we do utilize that. But you'll actually see here, I do actually have access to it right here as well. So it will have its own separate app as well. And it will be available throughout multiple different views within the Dynatrace platform. Yes?
Now, a tough AI question for you. How can you tell the difference, you being Davis now, not you being the person you are, between an anomaly and a problem? Let me be specific about the question. Anomaly is some metric is different. The behavior of some metric it's above its threshold or it's different than its history. So its behavior is anomalous. But is that anomaly in fact a problem or not, and how can you tell?
That's a good question. So I think everybody heard that question because there was a mic there. But one of the things we want to look at is, yes, we are looking for anomalies. We start with that. So we start with anomalous behavior, and then we look at, is it a degradation? So when we talk about things like response time, right, is that getting faster? Well, that's an anomaly, but that's probably not a bad thing, right? That's because we just pushed a new release and we improved our behavior. That's not going to trigger as a problem. So we look for those degradations, and we also look to track things against past normal behavior of the system. So for instance, we're not going to compare things like a Monday to a Saturday. That doesn't make sense. Normal business doesn't run like that. So we always want to look at past behavior for those particular timeframes. Now, is it possible that we're going to pick up an anomaly or a spike in overall load or overall traffic because somebody's running a special this week? And we might trigger that. That's possible, but there's also ways to build that in, so we can look at things like seasonal baselining. Or if we know that there's changes to the system coming, we want to be able to track those. But in general, if we see degradations to our behavior or all of a sudden our load on our system quadrupled, we probably still want to be aware of that. Okay? Even if it's something that maybe we were expecting, right? We want to make sure that that's actually, right, still being effective within our environment. We're not doing things like running out of resources, right? Anything else that might be coming along. Okay, I gotcha. Mm-hmm. So the question is, for things like inferior environments, you have things like, say, Kubernetes or containerized environments that spin up and down. You might have a few hundred, right, of those that are running, but maybe only 15 of them are actually active right now. The other ones are maybe have just been shut down, or they're still up and running, but they're not actually taking traffic. So we look at that from a couple different perspectives. So one, we still maintain the information for those instances, so you can go back and look at it, historically speaking. But things like our Smartscape are updated in real time. So what you'll actually see is different indications there. Solid lines indicate live and active traffic. Dotted lines mean, right, this is no longer active. But it was within the last 72 hours. So there's some of that that's actually built in. In addition to that, things like the service tracker or things like the distributed tracing that we're doing, we're always showing you the exact instances that that's coming through on. So it's, if, say, a service hasn't had traffic in the last 2 hours, it's not going to show up in your service view. It's not going to show up and muddy those waters because there's not actually actual transactions or actual traffic that's coming through there. So we always want to maintain that. So that's from a traceability perspective, but you'll also see this directly from an infrastructure perspective. Things like pods and details, you might want to go back and look at those information, but you want to make sure you understand what's actually running. That's more from an infrastructure monitoring perspective or a cluster monitoring perspective. And we've actually got a really great booth in the expo that I encourage you kind of stop by and take a look at, because we have some updated functionality, which we announced a couple months ago, which is getting ready to come out specifically around how we're tracking the Kubernetes cluster itself, tracking those individual entities and what they look like, and how you can actually visualize those. So I encourage you to check out that booth in the expo. Okay. They're giving me the red light, so I'll take one more question.
Is there a way to see the session replay information from a trace? I saw that it was linked to a log, but if you didn't have the logs associated to that particular one, can you get the session info from it?
Absolutely. So the question is around session replay, which is for those that are not familiar, it's real user monitoring functionality. It's the end user's perspective. I want to actually replay what was actually the end user actually saw in their web browser or on their mobile device. You can access that from the trace itself. You can also access it from the log. And where that actually comes from is just through distributed tracing headers and trace IDs that we track. So we actually link those together. In that case, the instance I actually happened to pick didn't have an end user. It was just generated through API calls. So there wasn't an actual end user on that, at that particular instance. But you do have the ability to link that both from the log as well as from the trace itself. So if you look up functionality called backtrace, you can follow that all the way back to your front end, and then you can look at the actual individual user sessions, and you'll be able to do that replay. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.